Meg, how are you? Happy Friday.
I'm great. It's good to see you again. Well, my dog is here. I apologize. It's a little windy today, so
All good. I think we're hearing like a year of COVID now, right? So I think the dogs in the Zooms is more the norm now than the exception.
I have a parakeet too, so he might make an appearance.
No way. What are their names?
Well, the dog is Millimeter because she is wee.
I love that.
Doesn't sound like it, but she's only 6 pounds.
No way.
And the parakeet's name is Archie, just because it seemed to suit his personality.
I love that. Millimeter and Archie. They seem like a dynamic duo if ever there was one.
Oh, they are. They run around the house and yell at each other. Got personalities.
No one would need a TV then, right? They are their own like built-in entertainment, it seems like.
And obligations, yeah.
Pretty special. And I'm so thankful to be here with you today. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. For everyone who's listening, this is Meg Dattoria. She is a 3D project manager at the Smithsonian. This is so wild that I get to talk to you. I remember visiting the Smithsonian as a kid. My family, we have relatives in DC. And I mean, it's such an institution, obviously. It's such a role model for the rest of the country and museums, and I'm so excited to learn from you and all the cool work that you're doing.
Amazing. You should come back and visit. I mean, they're not open right now, but with family in DC.
I'm ready for it. I have to I feel like during COVID, I've done a lot of daydreaming and thinking about, like when I host my next dinner party, like the table's going to look like this. And I have to start daydreaming about DC. Like I'm going to get my Georgetown cupcake first because I can't be in DC for over an hour and not have a cupcake. And then I'll just work the whole circuit of the museums. And I might have to request a tour from you.
Oh, definitely. I can make that happen.
Oh, I can't wait. So there's a lot to your story before you got to the Smithsonian. I want to understand it from the beginning. So with relation to your interest in arts and with like cultural institutions, did you study art as a kid? Like or history? Like what were your touch points there?
Yeah, my traditional background is in art. I entered college as an illustration major. I come from a very artistic family, so I'm going to give props to my mom for supporting that. So I entered as an illustration major, and then I moved into interdisciplinary object design, which was I split traditional metalsmithing and CAD modeling because I really enjoyed like object-centered artwork.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad that you took a pause because I wanted to pause you and say, these are some terms that I would love to understand. So you said interdisciplinary metalsmithing and
object design.
Oh, interdisciplinary object design. Was there metalsmithing in something that you said? Or
that was my focus. Yeah.
Oh my, and computer aided design. So like break that down if you will.
Right. So the traditional metalsmithing background was primarily like jewelry scale production of objects using traditional metalsmithing techniques. And then I coupled that with computer modeling because I used some CAD programming to design jewelry also. So I did some combinations of metal and 3D printed jewelry, and then I made some jewelry out of 3D modeling that was produced in ways that you couldn't really do with metal. So like printing parts within parts so that they were movable. So it's just like a really interesting exploration for me because I really enjoy the functionality of artwork. Yeah, so that was my focus.
Oh my gosh.
Well into my career.
And I remember when we were getting to know each other, you told me about this jewelry project. I thought it was really interesting because for that like utility purpose, you wanted people to be able to fidget with it, right? Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I actually found one of the rings.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, so this guy right here, we'll do it like an Instagram model. So I designed objects around the hand that had movable parts in them that mimicked just really simple ways that people fidget while they're working. And it was kind of focused towards adults, but I ended up making some for children too. But so this just sits on your hand, and then you can push the ball back and forth or just tip it back and forth. And it's just like that mild amount of stimulation that helps people focus. So my thesis project in school was designing a line of jewelry that was called Fidget. um, that was just small functionality around the hand that was just a discreet, quiet way for you to fidget in a professional setting.
I love that. And it's aesthetically beautiful. And also I think what's really cool is like, whatever industry we're in, if we're really passionate about a cause, we can find a way to marry our like skill set with aiding that purpose. And I think you did that really, really skillfully in your project.
Yeah, I had
Absolutely.
a lot of fun doing it, and then that rolled into a small business after I graduated, and then I sold them online for a couple years too.
Oh my gosh, I'm a master's student right now, and so this summer we start thinking about our thesis or our capstone, and I'm gonna try to do it the way you do it, like make it fun, make it something that it's gonna be all encompassing anyway, so it might as well be all encompassing in a way that's like fruitful for you beyond the project
Yeah,
itself.
I didn't plan it like that, but that's just, it kind of rolled into that after I posted it up online that people were asking where to buy them. So I just feel really fortunate about how that went.
Oh, that is so cool. In the design process there, you mentioned how like the computer aided design could do things, could achieve like purposes and like I guess functions that the metalsmithing couldn't.
Mhm.
Computer aided design, I mean, all I know of it is what I suppose from the words. So you just use a computer to design your model versus metalsmithing, you would go right to the, I
Yeah,
don't know what the tool is, but
yeah. With traditional metalsmithing, you're kind of limited in the ways that you can manipulate metal by hand and put metal together.
Mhm.
So I used the computer modeling to kind of I actually have another one here that demonstrates it. So this is just a basic ring, and it's got this little guy in it that has a register inside this channel. So it keeps it inside the channel, and it's free to move loosely. And it's printed all in one. So if you were to construct this out of metal, you'd have to do like the inner surface, the two edge surfaces, and the top one, and you have to construct it in a way that doesn't damage this when you're fusing it together. When I made this ring, I did a proof of concept to try to recreate it in metal myself to see like, is this worth it? Is it actually not that easy or impossible to do in metal? And yeah, I just made like a big lump of melted metal.
That's
But
crazy.
yeah,
So
so like making things inside of things or with tight tolerances, you just have like a lot more freedom, and you're not limited by getting the mathematics of this in your own mind correct
mhm.
when you do it through the computer. So that's what
When you're
interests me.
when you're doing it through a computer, this is like completely naive probably, but is it a graphic design background? Like is it or it's a totally different skill set, different software? Like
It is. It's different. It's different software. I mean, graphic design and computer like 3D modeling, I think have a lot of overlap because it's still about spatial understanding.
mhm.
Um, but I used there's just like a whole suite of 3D software, and it's kind of like everybody's different flavors, whichever one they like to use.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so cool.
and if you know one, you can kind of pick up another one because it's only the interface that's different, but it's the same concept. Like combining 3D objects is called a Boolean maneuver, and
A Boolean maneuver, one of my new words. I love a new word, so thank you. No, it's so interesting. Every artist, I guess, has their set of tools, and just the tools for someone who's working in the digital space they look a little bit different, but they make so much possible. So you graduated from Towson University. You were doing these different projects. You had launched this jewelry business. What was the next step?
the next step was the internship with the Smithsonian, which kind of happened in concert with the business side. Right out of college, I think I had been out for maybe 2 weeks. I was lucky enough to get an internship with the exhibits shop or office. Well, it's not office. It's called Smithsonian Exhibits now.
Mhm.
And they cater to all the different museums and have this big, beautiful warehouse full of like all the tools you can imagine to make any exhibit element. It was the most magical job to enter right out of college.
I love that you describe it as magical. Like I find the museum observing experience magical, but if I were to like personally be, like hanging up the pieces or like figuring out that stuff, like that sounds really hard. Where did your passion for that come from? And you mentioned your mom before, which is awesome because it's Women's History Month, so we're gonna do a lot of like lady power things in this conversation, which is great. Did she like you mentioned she was artistic too? Did she influence your love for museums? Like where did all of that love for that internship come from?
Well, the museum side definitely just came from me and my research, but the love of art 100% came from her. Like, she taught our art classes in elementary school. She was a
No
volunteer art
way.
teacher. She's always made, I mean, she makes, her approach to life is like, if you can make it, then you shouldn't buy it. So that's just like, that's also how I approach art, life. And that's kind of how I got into sculpture and like manipulating object-based things. So that's what really interested me, was like object-based artwork. And then that just blended into Smithsonian exhibits, because I could do model making, where I could make like a fake pile of earthworms for an exhibit. And just like that challenge of approaching it, because they just tell you like, this is what we need. We need fake pile of earthworms. It's like this big. And then you just kind of, you use the tools around you to make that happen and make it as realistic as you can. And that's
Oh
just
my
like
goodness.
dream. It's a dream job.
That's so cool. So it kind of reminds me of like being on a Hollywood set. Like you need like props or things like that. But in this case, you're trying to create like a realistic replica of a pile of worms. It's just a
Yeah,
little.
and a lot of the times the exhibits, I mean, there's an overlap there. We had a lot of people with a background in film working there. But the thing with exhibits is, a lot of times when you're making these reproductions, they have to survive like 4 years of being touched by the public too.
Oh, I never
So
thought
not
about
just,
that.
yeah, making something that looks convincing on a film, but it's like, it needs to look convincing and it needs to be durable to millions of children.
Oh my gosh. So I feel like that internship would teach you so much about different materials at your disposal.
Oh
And
yeah.
you would have the best of the best options. Like, oh my gosh, now I'm thinking of like, the closet in The Devil Wears Prada. Like Vogue probably has the best closet of clothing, but like the Smithsonian probably has the best closet of materials to make replicas.
Yeah, that shop is incredible. Yeah, and you learn from the people around you. There's people who've been working there for 30 years and they tried all the different materials. So it's like the modern, like best thing, the best like sculpting material that you think that you have right now maybe doesn't solve the specific problem that you have. That there's like some old material back on a shelf far away that's like marked with a Sharpie in an old cardboard box, and then they bust that out and that like perfectly solves your problem
Oh
too.
my gosh. When you're in that team, then do they work like in their own silo? Because I feel like the other people in the museum would not be able to match the expertise that you guys have. Like, do they just bring you the project, you work on it, you give it back to them, or was there a lot of collaboration you had to do? How does that work?
There was a lot of collaboration between the people working in the shop. Like, people had their expertise. Like, we had a woman who was really good at recreating different surface details for like marble and wood. So she would always get the painting jobs to do that. So like somebody else would maybe sculpt the thing and then would hand it off to her to do the faux painting. Yeah, it was hugely collaborative, and everybody was always in on all of the prep meetings and giving advice on which material you should use, and maybe they'll take a small part of the project because they were the expert in that.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Did you have a favorite internship project?
I do, and it's not glamorous. It was so after I interned, and I luckily like rolled right into getting hired to support another project. One of my first solo projects that I got to do without supervision was for the zoo. They have this exhibit for the whooping crane in front of the whooping crane, I guess also exhibit, where they're housed. They have panels that talk about the research that's being done on whooping cranes, and one of the things that they're doing is they're feeding the males and the females different colored food, so that when they defecate, the poop is that color, so then they can tell like which animal they're picking up the specimen from. And then that's
That's
just like it's like a tiny specific process that has to happen in the zoo's research. And I got to make the replica crane poop to be mounted to this display as a
I
touchable element for that exhibit.
Oh my gosh, I can see why that would be so fun though. Like, and just so fun to talk about and so novel, like only at the Smithsonian.
Yeah, yeah, I learned so much about so few things.
Oh my gosh, I think you should write a book. I feel like a children's book on replica crane poop is in the making. I don't know. I'm just putting that
I'm
out
passionate about it.
there. No, that's so cool. And so it sounds like that department, you could work on projects across the Smithsonian, right? Like the Smithsonian Institutes. I like, how many Smithsonian Institutes are there? Is there a lot?
There's 19 museums, 9 research centers, and a zoo, but then there's also all the affiliate museums, and I don't know how many those are.
Oh my gosh. And all of those could come to your group and need help. Wow. And was this the team that you worked on immediately before the role that you're in now? Okay.
Yeah,
And
I was there for 4 years doing exhibits and mount making for objects for display because I had the traditional metalsmithing background. So that also, mount making is kind of a puzzle in that you have this object and they want it to be displayed 3 feet in the air in this position, and you have to like build a metal support that holds it stable like that, but also does not detract from viewing the object. So those are really fun puzzles too.
I love the use of the term puzzles for it. I feel like that's completely accurate. Problem solving every day with like no rules or no models to rely on because everything sounds like so unique.
Yeah, it's great.
That's so amazing. And I can see how then like you would transfer from that group to the digitization office, like equally interdisciplinary, different types of projects. But I mean, there's so much you loved about the tactile parts of the exhibits work. How did you decide to make that pivot?
Well, I found a lot of interest in touchable exhibit elements while I was working in the exhibits team. And we did a lot of 3D scanning to make 3D printed replicas for those touchable elements. So that's when I got a taste for the 3D scanning side of the object. And yes, I still enjoy like creative, artistic, tactile work. I don't do that so much in my current office, but it's still kind of, the work that I do is about making these objects accessible in different ways, and it's still like object-based interest. I found it like a really easy transition, really, because I mean, your job is still to present this object in a way to the public that's consumable and accessible, but just in a different format.
That is so cool. So it's called the Digitization Program Office. That's where you're currently based. And when did the office come into like existence? Like, can you give me a little bit of that history?
Yeah, I believe it is 9 or 10 years old at this point. I've been there for 6 years. So when they started, when the office began, it's split into a couple different facets, but I'll just talk about the 3D side. It was started by Vince Rossi and Adam Metallo, who also both came from the exhibits office that I came from, which is interesting.
Wow,
So
there's like a funnel, there's a path.
Yeah, our office was built with like an artistic background, and most of the people who work there have some kind of artistic origin. But so they started 9 or 10 years ago, and their original purpose of the office was to do proof of concept for 3D technology applications in the museum world. So they worked with all the different museums. They had them propose one like keystone object to digitize. So then the office digitized these objects and gave them like really personal manual love to make them into beautiful 3D models, and posted those up online with educational content and interactive experiences as a proof of concept to the museums that like this is useful for displaying your objects. This is useful technology. So that was the first couple of years, was making these exciting experiences that really demonstrated the use of 3D technology in the museum. And then since then, they've kind of evolved into more collections-based digitization. So now the goal is to apply 3D technology in the most useful way to museum objects, not just in like shiny, interesting ways, like a space shuttle, but you know, a collection.
Pretty shiny and interesting.
Yeah, I mean that was an incredible project to work on. But we're focusing right now on educational and research use of the models, and not just entertainment purposes. I mean, they weren't just entertainment purposes before, that was not the right wording, but less shiny and more research purposes. So we like are digitizing collections of objects now, so that you have this set of data that can help you compare objects together, or take measurements from them, use them in your own research, or if if they're Creative Commons CC0 licensed, you can even download them and like remix them into your own artwork.
That is so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of like all of the big data possibilities around art or sculpture or historical like objects. But when you get down to it, anything can be coded, and it can be coded really detailed, and you guys are doing that so well. And I think, so you mentioned that this office is like almost a decade old, if not older. What foresight that must have taken. Like, I think everyone now, because of COVID, is like, we need 3D everything. We need digitized, we need access. I learned a little bit about museums gaining like millage, I guess, is like money that you get for your works being visible to certain populations. And that might be totally wrong. That's my understanding at a very elementary level. But you can't achieve all those purposes if your work can't get in front of people. And if your doors are closed, you know, that can't happen. But their proofs of concept happened without any of these circumstances. They couldn't be like, you're going to need this because a pandemic's going to come and no one's going to come to the museum for 365 plus days. I wonder, I mean, I just think that would have been so cool to be a fly on the wall in those rooms when they had this vision that people maybe didn't see the urgency of yet.
Yeah, the original like drive of the museum, of the digitization program office, or the 3D side, was to digitize these objects so that they can be used in more ways than just putting the object on display. So like when you put it up online, you can put way more information with it than people can consume in an exhibit when they're walking past. You can see it in different ways. And like I said, you can download it and use it in your personal education setting, like put it in your classroom and augmented reality and stuff like that. But now, yeah, everybody is really appreciating just the plain accessibility aspect of 3D digitization. Just like, these objects can't be on display right now. And this is the only way that you can really share them, other than photography. So we're quite busy right now.
And it's not like you guys have a shortage of objects to digitize. Can you speak a little bit to that volume? It's some unreal number, I remember.
Yeah, I believe it's 154 million at this point. They haven't manually counted each and everything. And so even when the museums were open, in the many 19 museums, less than 1% could be on display at any given time. So accessibility purposes, we also, a lot of what we digitize is stuff that isn't actively on display too. So you could either open this up because people can't see it, just a collection of corals, or you could relate that collection to something that is on display. So like have a touchable interactive in the museum so people can see more objects than could be physically displayed.
I love that. I feel like, you know, in telling like a brand story, I come from a marketing background. We think about how, you know, the experience on Instagram should not be a carbon copy of your website, should not be a carbon copy of your store, but they should all flow together and like take people on a journey with you. And I think that it sounds like the Smithsonian is setting the example for how a museum does the same thing of like creating this narrative across like platforms and mediums for different types of people for the access that they're craving. And that is all super powerful. So you mentioned the process now where collections are almost like pitched to your office. They're creating a claim for why their work needs digitization first or next. And that there's a few different considerations, I guess, that go into why their work would go first. Can you tell me a little bit about what like that pitch is like?
Yeah, so because we are pretty limited in our resources and 154 million objects to 3D digitize right now would take just an entire lifetime, if not multiple. We ask for a unit digitization plan, is what it's called, where the different units or museums propose collections or specific objects that they have specific uses for 3D digitizing. And then we look at those and we factor in how difficult they would be to digitize. Like if we could set up an automated system, a turntable to churn out and get more throughput for our time and effort. If the object is possible to be digitized, because right now we're a little limited by the technology in that we can't digitize fur and we can't digitize glass because it's a line of sight process. So if you can see through the object, then pretty much all of the 3D processes that you use are not going to be able to see the form. They're just going to see through the object. And with fur, you're thinking to digitize something like with photogrammetry, where you're taking photographs around the object. You need to take photographs entirely around the object in order to construct this 3D form. And so with fur, it's like each piece of fur is its own object. So you'd have to somehow get in and around each individual.
That's like making me stressed as you describe it. Like that just seems so.
We've done some testing on it, but there's not a great process for it yet. But the technology advances incredibly every day. So we take into account how we would digitize it, like how we would go about it if it's possible, and also then the value of that digitized object being like, what kind of stories can this tell to the public? What research value does it have? Is it related to an educational program? Is it related to a current exhibit? Yeah, and like we said, we're focusing on a lot of education-based digitizing this year. And also a lot related to, there's an initiative called Race, Culture, and Our Shared Future. Mm-hmm. So we're taking a lot of project plans related to that, so that we can really highlight objects that may not be on display, but tell rich stories of race and community.
It's such an important thing. We have our local museum here in Northwest Arkansas, and what I love is that when I read like the plaques, I guess, next to the elements in the museum, they actually do tell you the background of the story. Like the person, if it's from an Indigenous artist, like that person's whole like reasoning and motivation for creating the piece, and just to get more diversity into our museums is so important. And it's great to hear the ways that, you know, such a pillar in our museum landscape is doing that. You shared with me, and I'm so thankful that you did, this American history exhibit called Girlhood, in parentheses, It's Complicated. And I'm so excited to like share the screen and get into a little bit of the process of digitizing with you through that. Is that one of the examples of the focus that you just mentioned of like race and diversity and things like that, or how did this project come about?
That is another initiative, the American Women's History Initiative, which is another great one. And we're looking forward to doing more projects related to that in the coming year. But the exhibit, I can send you a link, or perhaps you can share a link on your Instagram. Yeah. The Girlhood Exhibit had a lot of artifacts in it that just, it's a big topic, talking about what girlhood means. So this object in particular was kind of demonstrating where we came from and the evolution of athletic wear for women. So this is actually a gymnasium suit, and it's not a special gymnasium suit. It's like what a teenage girl would have worn to gym class in the 1800s to do gymnastics. And you can see it's got a full skirt and bloomers that go all the way up to the waist.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's like weight training too. I think that stuff's heavy. Like that's a lot to carry on your body.
It was pretty light. I mean, we don't touch the
baggy. Like that's just a lot of fabric.
It is. It's definitely a lot of fabric to like tangle your legs in.
Oh my gosh, while flipping or doing whatever gymnastics looked like at that time. So if I click on this will show us.
This is going to show you the 3D viewing platform. So this is just show you the end result that my office puts out when we digitize something. It's this 3D model that we put into our viewer, which is open source. It's called Voyager. And then we work with the museum to get, we call it content, but it's just educational information and contextual information about the object. So you saw that it pulled up a big chunk of text. So that's just the article viewer. So that's where you can put like the panel information you were talking about that you would see in the museum. Yes. Or you can put the collections record, which is I think what we put there. So you see the images of the original object. And then we also have these annotations that you can highlight specific parts on the object, which would be difficult to do in the exhibit.
And that's like this thing right here. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the annotations. So then the user can go in and they can open up the annotations and do kind of some self-discovery. But then a lot of our models also have a tour functionality, which you don't see in this one, but it would be at the top of the icon list on the left. And it's a globe. And that takes you on a guided tour through all the content that the curator picks. So that's like having the curator standing next to you, looking at the object, like guiding you around and pointing out the different elements on it that are interesting to them.
That's so handy. If only we could always have a curator right by our side when we are looking at a piece, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
This one's also a really interesting case for 3D digitization, because it's not only access and accessing this object in like a deep personal way and zooming in a way that you can't in the exhibit, because that object is like actually on exhibit right now in the Girlhood exhibit. But also this specific piece is very fragile. I said it's from the 1800s, and it took a lot of conservation work to get it on display. And because it's so fragile, they have decided that this is the last time that it's going to go on display.
Wow.
So in us digitizing it and putting it online is now the only way that you're going to be able to access and look at this object moving forward. And also, it also kind of documents the conservation efforts that went into it. Because you can see the stains of sweat that the wearer put into this suit. I think they're incredibly beautiful, the stains, because
Yes.
it really connects you physically to the object to see, you know, sweat stains on a ridiculous gymnastics suit, and all the struggle that went into wearing it.
She definitely worked harder in her gym class than I did. I was definitely sitting on the sideline doing my homework, if I'm going to be honest. So that's very impressive. Oh, that's so cool. And so this is the 3D like result of taking the multiple photographs, right? Is that what we're looking at right now?
Yep. This is the end result. So what our office outputs out of projects is we put the object up in the viewer with whatever curated content the museum wants to put with it. And then we also make our data, for the most part, all downloadable. So you can download the 3D data package and the metadata that goes with the object and the collections record to use it in your own educational or like artistic purposes. And like I said, if it's a CC0 object, which I believe that this one is, but let me check to be sure. We have a big initiative in our office to make our data open access. So yeah, this one is CC0. So you could download this data and use it for whatever purposes you want without asking permission. You can even use it in commercial usage. You can 3D print this garment and put it on a keychain and sell that.
No way. Does CC0 stand for something? Do you know, like, what is that?
Creative Commons.
Sorry, what was it?
Creative Commons.
Creative
It's
Commons.
a license type that just means that you can just take this data and use it for anything, and you don't need to worry about getting permissions to use it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that that's one of the initiatives of the Smithsonian, and it I guess it speaks to the broader desire for accessibility in general. Is that like the motivation behind CC0?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that is about a year old. I think we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the Smithsonian Open Access was the initiative. So I don't know the numbers. Let me pull it up really quickly. They made so many digital images and audio clips. We just contributed the 3D digitization part, but the Smithsonian Open Access Initiative made so much data accessible to the public for uses in any way that they want. Like you can find a beautiful photograph of some historic tapestry and like turn that into a wallpaper in your own home.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's an incredible initiative too. Oh, 3 million, more than 3 million 2D and 3D digital assets are open to the public to use in any way.
Oh my gosh.
As of last January.
I can't imagine. That's going to be so cool to see how it continues to grow and how people like learn how to leverage it. And I think that brings us to, you know, I think that's so cool about 3D. We talked about COVID. We talked about museums being closed. Like, what do you think is the importance of 3D, of digitization at large, to museums?
Oh, that is a big question with a lot of answers.
Basically answer the mysteries of the world, right?
I just think that like it's up to the user on what they can think of to do with it. But you can support research by digitizing an entire dig site while it's actively being excavated. So then you have this like down to like 9-micron accuracy documentation of how the bones were arrayed before you removed them. So then, I mean, that the research value of that and reassembling the bones is incredible, but then also sharing that with the public, because to connect them with the research that went into presenting this fossil in front of you is incredible.
Mhm.
Supporting exhibits, you can do touchscreen interactives, like I said, that let you dive deeper and closer into the object. While it's standing there next to you, you can appreciate it. I mean, it is essential to keep the objects away from the public so that they're preserved and can be seen for many generations to come. So that when you 3D digitize them, it lets the user just like get right up in it and see like the threading detail on that gymnastics suit and the sweat detail.
Right.
It also provides more information than can be consumable in a traditional exhibit, because they have strict limits on the amount of text that is in an exhibit, just so that when you're walking through an exhibit, you can't just like stand in front of one case for the entire day and be expected to take in the entire museum. So
Right.
the 3D interactive experiences online can serve as like a repository for all of the information that they have about this object. And then you can go up online and deep dive in as deep as you want and get the level of information that you want, or you can just take it all. Like one I highly recommend is Neil Armstrong's Spacesuit, which is up
Yes,
on our
you
website.
mentioned this one. Oh, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, that has the most information that than we've ever put on a 3D model. So, and it's out in subs. It's categorized because the information is so dense. So you get
Okay.
some like conservation detail, because that one was part of a Kickstarter campaign to conserve the suit to put it back on display. So if you supported that initiative, you can go into the 3D model and see like where your support actually went to present this object.
Oh my gosh. There's so the first thing you said, like I had no idea about the text limits on the exhibits, but it absolutely makes sense. Like I'm the kind of like OCD person where I need to read like the whole sign of every sign in the exhibit to say that I saw the exhibit. And so I appreciate them like toning it back so that I can get through it in a
There's a
day.
wall there for the consumer. If you see it like a giant chunk of text next to something, you might not even attempt to start reading it.
Right. It's just like I can't handle it. So to that point, I wondered if you had any advice for people of like navigating a museum and like getting the most out of it, even if it's personal or if it's like a technical thing that really people should do when they're in a museum.
Oh, I don't have any technical advice, but I personally like to do it. I mean, even taking in one Smithsonian museum in an entire day is a tough thing to do, especially if you're reading all of the text panels. But
I'll leave with a headache.
yeah, I like to just go floor by floor and take breaks in between. And I have the luxury of working in DC, so I can do that. So my advice doesn't really make sense for someone visiting DC. It's just, I think that you're going to have to pick some focuses to go in and view. Taking in either one museum or just picking active exhibits at different museums to visit. And then engaging with the online content afterwards when you have more time.
I think that's a great way to like continue the experience or to make it digestible, because it can get a little overwhelming when you're like, I have to get it all in today because I'm here for one moment. It's like, no, you can do it at home too, and like incorporate other elements that make it all the richer. The other thing you mentioned, which I hadn't realized, was that the Armstrong thing was through a Kickstarter.
Yeah,
That's so cool. I've never heard of anything like it. But I think, I mean, I imagine as people continue to discover works that are not on display, you might get more cohorts of people who are similarly passionate about, I don't know, like preserving things or showcasing them. Do you know anything about how like that Kickstarter came to be and how they like collaborated with the Smithsonian, which is this huge institution?
I believe that the Smithsonian put that Kickstarter together.
Okay.
Yeah, so they initiated it, and it was our first one. I think there's been at least one more, because there was also conserving the ruby slippers was another one, which are on display now. So I
No.
mean, it sometimes in the museum it's difficult to get funding for specific purposes that the public is interested in, because you have to go for different like pools of money. So when we make a Kickstarter, it's like basically asking the public, like, is this important to you to see?
Right.
And if it is, would you help support the conservation work to make that happen? So I think that it's like an incredible use of that social movement that we have now.
Yes. I was literally for class listening to a TED talk the other day about old power versus new power, and Kickstarter was given as an example of new power because it's like power that's shared and it's like collaborative and a collective. And so I love that the museum used that platform as a way for like people to put their money where their heart was and to make things a reality as a group. I feel like that would make the experience of the Smithsonian all the more sticky for people because they're like, I'm the reason that this shoes are here right now, which is so special.
And they got a really incredible result out of it too, because Armstrong Spacesuit is clearly one of like the cornerstone objects in American history.
Yes.
It's first like object to touch the moon's surface, like human object. So they had a strict idea of the conservation work that needed to go into it in order to display it in a way that doesn't at all take away from the future viewability of the object. So that's why they needed the Kickstarter. It was because they needed to give extraordinary attention to this object. But the end result was that they made this incredible custom mount for it that goes inside the spacesuit and actively circulates air through the suit, like to take the off-gassing material out through a filtration system. It's like very futuristic. It's state of the art.
It sounds amazing. I can't imagine there ever being a dull day at your job, but like it is a human job, right? You do have dull days. Like it sounds so exciting.
Yeah, sure. There's some like administrative days. It's all about planning and negotiating rights research and stuff like that. But the end result is it's so satisfying that
it makes it worth it.
Yeah, I'll send all the emails I need to.
Right, as long as we get that Armstrong suit properly ventilated and the Ruby slippers accounted for, we are golden.
Yeah, I mean, I got to stand in the presence of Armstrong's suit. I got to like get up close and analyze materials for digitization. I spent like an entire week with it, and that's one of the highlights of my whole life. You know?
That is amazing. Oh my gosh. Like I said, the book, I mean, it doesn't have to just be about the worms, but I think you've got a lot of good content here for a museum adventure. So Meg, as we're wrapping up, I mean, this has been so lovely and such a wealth of knowledge, and I thank you. And I wonder if you have any parting advice for people who want to learn more, who are interested in museums, who want to be in your shoes making replicas or 3D digitizing, all the gamut, anything and everything.
Well, I would say definitely go to the website that houses all of our 3D assets and just dig in and follow what interests you and download and enrich that information, because we really put it out there to the public so that the public can take it and just like make it more useful. So I would say that, but then also advice for people looking to get into the industry is that the technology changes on the second. So it's just really important to follow industry leaders on social media and their websites and just be up to date with what the most current technology and focuses are. Just to make yourself aware of the technology if you're trying to enter the field. Because like I came in doing computer modeling. I don't do any modeling really anymore. It's about scanning. And then I came in using like an older structured light scanner that by the time that I got into the office, like from college to that office, nobody was using that scanner anymore. So it's just about like following the technology. And I'd say a big focus is photogrammetry. If you want to like dip your toes and learn about the technology, is attempts of photogrammetry, because that's like an entry point you can take with just cell phone photographs. You can create a 3D model, and then it's just about learning how to make that model more accurate and better.
No way. Is photogrammetry like for the gym jumpsuit? It looked like there was a room where you had a photo, like taking a bunch of angles. Is that what photogrammetry is?
Yeah, that was like a highly specialized.
Yeah, like that's the not the iPhone version.
But yeah, it is. you take rotational photographs around the object, and your purpose is to like get a couple angles on every point of detail on the object and like go into every crevice and get several photographs, because you feed that into specialized software that is going to recognize key points around the object, like a speck of dirt or like the point of a nose, and it's going to identify that on all these photographs, and then it's going to align them together in space, and then it interpolates a 3D surface from all of these points that it identifies. So it sounds crazy, but if you have the right software, you can take photographs around, you know, a vase you have in your home, take 150 photographs around it, and you're gonna have like a pretty decent data set out of that.
Oh my goodness. So photogrammetry is the first thing to dive into. And if you mentioned these like industry leaders and stuff to follow, are there specific people, podcasts, like news sources? What are you keeping tuned to?
That's a good question. Well, you could follow us on Instagram.
I will tag you guys because absolutely everyone should be following your team.
There's also on Twitter. I mean, Twitter is a great place for it. If you follow some hashtags like open access or 3D or MuseTech is a good one. It's MUSETECH. And that's just going to tell you like the most recent technology that museums are using to exhibit in different ways. So that one's always the bleeding edge of technology, which I really enjoy. But yeah, just follow institutions and follow companies who make the software and the hardware. And follow people who are talking about it. That's great too.
Yes.
That's enriching this and moving it forward. It's such a collaborative, universal process right now to build this technology out for everybody's different needs.
Oh my gosh, I love everything about it. I'm so excited to see how museums continue to evolve, and I think it's a great silver lining of this really sad and what was a really hard last year is that it's forcing us all to grow and to care about different things like access, and that's never going to be a bad thing. Meg, one more thing. What do you want people to leave knowing about you, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, I get something that I feel really strongly about in this interview is that I just love my job. I love my job so much because of what I get to learn about the objects individually. Like I said, I learn a lot about a little. Like if you enter the museum world kind of in any facet, you just get a really intimate knowledge of objects, and I learn a lot about myself while doing that too. I feel like I'm a visual learner. You probably are as well.
Yeah.
So seeing something really brings it home for me. But when it's an object-based thing, it really relates it to the human body, I find.
Mm-hmm.
So just, yeah, I feel like you can learn a lot from objects about like our past and learning from our past, and also just how people interacted with the world in the past and how you can relate to that and the decisions you would have made in their situation. So that's a little bit about like where my focus is right now.
But I love that. The way you described it gives me goosebumps. Like it's so true, and it's so powerful.
And I guess my parting message is to take a look at the Smithsonian's open access assets, because people are making some incredible things, and that is really exciting for the people on the other end who are creating the assets too. So I personally would love to see people download the 3D data assets and make art out of them. There's some incredible examples I've seen online on Twitter and Instagram. There was someone who downloaded this ancient elephant picture that is like a bronze sculpture, and they adapted it to make it look like a chocolate bunny with the foil peeling off of it.
No way.
And chocolate around. That's just incredible.
Oh my gosh. How do you find, like, would this be by following those hashtags like open access, or because I want to find this elephant with the bunny wrapping paper?
Yeah, I follow the open access hashtags. I follow when somebody's tagged our accounts or said 3D. Sometimes I'm just searching for Smithsonian on different like 3D repository websites to see if anybody has uploaded anything with any of our assets. But if you follow our accounts, we share on Instagram. I usually share it in the stories, and we share on Twitter too. And I think that the Open Access Initiative is about to release a blog post that highlights a lot of the uses that just happened or over the past year from open access objects. So It's si.edu/open access. If you want to see just the repository of all the stuff and the different ways that artists and educators have been using the assets.
Oh, I'm so excited for people to take a look at that. We're going to link it in our description and everything so that people will be able to head right over there. Meg, it's been such a pleasure. I never in my life thought I'd get to talk to people at the Smithsonian in the 3D printing world of art and museums. So you made my week, and I'm so excited to share this conversation.
Thank you. It's been incredible. I've had so much fun.